Welcome to Paranormal M, where every shadow hides a story waiting to be told. Subscribe and activate notifications to stay updated with our latest haunting content. Embrace the thrill of the supernatural. Weird sighting. I'm staying with some family in a very rural area. The closest stores are super far away, like hours. We got here late Friday and we're leaving late Monday. Today, my cousin and brother happened to see a drone that was following them. They were on land that we have about 200 plus acres over here. Everyone was a bit confused. Didn't really like it because it's creepy and, well, it's an invasion of privacy. It's on our private property. But we sort of just disregarded it, figuring somebody was on their land nearby or just bored or something. It's now 2:25 a.m. Monday. My parents were together outside relaxing near the house on this swing chair thing, listening for the nighttime sounds. I was inside with my grandparents in bed. I was with my cousins and two siblings. That's when I got a sudden phone call at 2 a.m. I was very confused. Didn't think anybody'd be calling right now. I grabbed my phone, realizing it was my mom's, so I immediately answered, making sure things were okay outside. Since there's plenty of weird insects, poisonous things, snakes, coyotes, and wolves, etc. around here. My mom gets scared pretty easily. She says in a concerned voice, "Me and Dad just saw something flash over our heads really low down on us. We don't know what's happening." So I told my cousin and my brother and sister, and everybody seemed pretty freaked out because that's very unusual. We all run out to the trees by our house to get my parents, who were just sort of staring up at the sky and a bit far away, panicking. As everybody was outside staring around at the sky, we managed to point out multiple drones or something strange in the sky, like flashing, getting farther away and closer. We saw one, then another, but then we saw up to 5 and some disappearing. We thought for a moment, well, stars. But why would my parents have something on them shining and hearing whirring sounds? We drove well, in quotes it says a donkey. I don't know what it's called. It's like a small vehicle like a golf cart, but not. But we drove into the field and it was closed. So we sort of shined a spotlight on where it was, right above the trees. It started coming towards us, and then I saw something weird by it that suddenly went fast, toward it. It then stopped and fell in the woods. So we started driving away and went back home. But then my dad drove over there with my cousin and siblings, my mom, and then my grandma came out into the porch of the house, and I was waiting for them to come back while they looked for the drones in the sky themselves. I went inside because I was getting bugs on me and I disliked it a lot. I started hearing weird noises from outside the house, and I heard a yell. And the dog started howling and barking a lot. Then I heard my mom tell my grandma, like I just heard my sister scream, and that something's up with the cows. After a bit, my family all came back and they're still outside. But my sister came in to explain what was up with the tears in her eyes and fear in her face. She said that they went out there and everything was absolutely fine, but then heard the cows starting to act weird. And then she heard it, a loud woman scream, and the UFO was getting closer, flashing green and red, as they drove fast back to us. Everyone's so confused and freaked the hell out. What's happening? Why are these things watching us? Why are there so many? What are they and why? And isn't this illegal? Is it something bad? New vehicle blind spot sensors, and my wife. So I will preface this by saying thank you for reading. If you don't believe, well, that's okay by me. But this is a true story. My wife and I had been together for going on 10 years now. She's always had what I perceive as a connection to a separate unseen world that I'm just not privy to. It kind of runs in her family. Her mother, sister, niece, and nephew all seem to have some of it. But by far, my wife is one that's the most in tune, so to speak. For example, she's seen her mother in the house. We live with her father and has seen other spirits, horrible-looking things that'll spook or scare her. And in the particular, bend I'm talking mostly about in the second and third paragraphs, she's seen my uncle who passed in December 2017. That was at his house in the same town. At the end of April, we brought a newer car. It's a 2014 Infiniti JX35. It's a mid-sized SUV. It has a lot of bells and whistles, one of which is a blind spot warning light on the inside of the car near where the side mirrors are. Just a standard LED, I assume, that senses when something of certain size or dimension or something else is there. But anyway, we live currently in a little rural town outside a decent city of almost 1 million people. Well, the town that we live in is right outside of it, about a 20-minute drive. Very rural, very open desert in the southwest. Now, as far as I knew when we got the vehicle, those sensors only picked up other vehicles and large objects. Not really seen if it picks up smaller motorcycles or bicycles. Well, one night we turn off the highway onto the road that leads into our town. My wife points out that the sensor light's lit up. Now, this is a 2-lane highway, pretty sharp bend after you make the turn off the highway. So we're going on this road. There's about 5 feet of sand and dirt once you get off the pavement. In this same bend is where, just by the way the blind spots are and how the bend is, I assume that there's been at least a couple of accidents. However, it would take some reckless driving to really make a bad crash, specifically because you need to turn on and off the highway. But anyway, she points out the light and informs me that she's seen this light and sensor light frequently, like 3 or 5 times a month since we got this vehicle. But we had just brought this up about a month ago. So now I'm starting to pay more attention to it, because the bend is to the left and the sensor that lights up is to the passenger side, most times I don't see it. That night she just brought it up. I tried to trigger it by driving really close to fences or trash bins or light posts. We did this at varying speeds, but to no avail. It lights up when there's a vehicle at random. All this brings us to the events of last night. We bought a house in the city at the end of the last month. We've been working on almost a nightly basis to paint and fix it prior to us moving in. We had just finished painting and taping walls and trim at close to 9 p.m. It was a nice, clear, not too hot night, and my wife decided that we should open our windows and sunroof, turn off the AC. This is kind of out of the ordinary for us, since we live in a very dry and hot part of the country. So we do. I turn off our street and just are headed down to my dad's place to pick up her kids, and we have the windows down. My wife has her right hand out of the window. We're in a decently lit part of town near sort of a Pep Boys, a Walgreens, and other stores. That's when my wife suddenly gives out a scream and a shiver, places her face into her arm, and is holding onto my arm with both hands, not wanting to look anywhere. Alarmed because it's normally not this bad, I ask her what's going on. Is she okay? All those basic questions. But after about 10 or 15 seconds, she looks back at the window, raises the window, closes the sunroof, and tells me to close mine, and I do. It's at this time that she tells me what happened. With her hand out the window, she, out of the corner of her eye, saw the same sensor light come on, and as she was turning her head to look, she felt what she described as if a hand had grazed the top of her arm and hand. She didn't say that she saw anything at this time, and I just assumed that she didn't, because it kind of made it look like after she felt what grazed her hand and arm. But after closing the window and sunroof, she stated that they're not welcome, and they should leave right now. About 5 seconds later, she shivered and stated that she felt cold for a second, but that it was gone now. We went to pick the kids up, go eat dinner, and her niece and her our aunt, and they were helping us with the house and drove separately. We went home, we were almost home again, and we saw the light come on, much closer to the house that we currently live in. We tried to drive really close and slow next to a pole on our property. Not surprisingly, the pole didn't get the sensor to light up, even though it was within like 4 feet of our vehicle. Well, that was a boring one. No offense. Trying to make sense of bizarre Ouija experiences, 10 years age. 10 years ago, my cousin and I were just messing around with the paper Ouija board. I was in a weird skeptic phase. I followed all kinds of people in the skeptic community like Penn Jillette, Hitchens, and James Randi. I wanted to see what happened if I arranged the experiment differently. I wanted to disprove Ouija boards, but I got a completely unexpected and unexplained but repeatable result. We set up a printed Ouija board with a paper cursor. We asked it questions. Then we would see if it would respond with the paper cursor. To my complete surprise, it did. It's been buzzing in my head once in a while, completely shattering everything I thought I knew. I just can't get over it. I'm desperately seeking answers only to be told that something else is blowing on it. And I repeated this several times. Maybe the AC was doing it, but later explained how that didn't even make sense. I guess I'll try again here. This is just one of the several sessions, including one that I did alone. Here's some details. I did this in 4 different locations. The place where I was living and work, the hotel room, which works, the aunt's house, who was always fascinated with stuff, also works, and the new apartment. Didn't work. I did this with different groups of people, like me alone, me with my cousin, me with my uncle, me with my cousin, me with my uncle, me with my cousin, me with my cousin. It responded consistently after asking questions, but it'll become weaker as the session goes. We did ask it to flicker the candle, and it did flicker the candle noticeably many times. Later on the video, I asked it, math questions, and it did correctly blow to the letters. Also, later on the video, I stupidly taunted it. It got angry, I guess, and kept blowing the cursor every time I placed it. We did these sessions across almost an entire year, including in January early evening when the AC was on. I did suspect maybe it was an amazing coincidence that the AC could be blowing on it. I literally had to put the thing 2 feet next to the AC to make it blow. Temperature during the session dropped. I can only feel the wave of coldness while waiting for an answer. This has been bugging me for years. I really want answers. What's really happening? Would appreciate somebody pointing me in the right direction. My dogs disappeared for 3 hours. One time my mom and I were going out for lunch. We have 2 dogs. One that's 100 pounds and another that's 50. So they aren't really small. My mom told me to let them outside before we left. They were going to stay out and play and use the bathroom while we were gone, so I did. An hour later we get back and our dogs aren't outside. Okay, maybe I didn't let them out. Check the house, which is a 1-story, 1,000 square foot place, so not huge. Nothing. Well, maybe they're outside. And maybe they aren't just coming to us. There are plenty of hiding spots in our backyard, 2 sheds, a lot of trees, and a sectioned off area that we call the squirrel yard. We once had a pet squirrel, but that's another story. The dogs could also get into it, but we don't really have squirrels anymore, so I go outside searching everywhere for them and nothing. Well, now we're considering the fact that our dogs got out. So we checked the perimeter of our yard, and we have a 6-foot privacy fence so our dogs can't jump it. But they have been known to dig holes under the fence. And here's the thing, no holes. None. Absolutely no way they could have squeezed under the fence. Now we're thinking somebody stole our dogs. Our 100-pound dog looks like a pit bull mix. so it makes sense because of the dog fights, and maybe they took the 50-pound one for similar reasons. Well, the thing is they would have had to climb the privacy fence because the fence is padlocked, and the locks are still in place. So how could they get these dogs over the fence? Well, I nixed that idea. Turned to checking her house locks, and maybe they came inside. Nah, everything was locked, even the windows. Well, maybe the dogs are inside and they're hiding. Checked everywhere under the beds and closets, even the rooms where they were closed off. Nothing. I go back outside, end up taking the grate off for access point to crawl space. I crawl around under the house and they aren't there. Our last bet is to go search the neighborhood, even though there's logically no way they could have gotten out. We leave the house, all the doors locked as per usual, to begin searching, and well, nothing. An hour later, we come home, planning our next move. I'm about to go in the crawl space again when I hear my mom shouting for me. There, laying in their bed, sound asleep. There's our dogs. No one else has keys to our house, no locks were broken, all windows shut and locked. There's no logical way for our dogs to have left our property and suddenly reappear. And they were, totally fine. One of them is scared of everything, so it made sense for him to be freaking out if something happened, but nope. This took place over the course of 3 hours, from the time we got home to when they reappeared. I still can't figure out how our dogs just disappeared. My great-grandmother was swinging with me. Yesterday I posted a comment detailing the story of my disappearing dogs. Later made a separate post for it. But since then I've been thinking about the weird stuff that's been happening in my life. I've always thought that my life was pretty uneventful in the paranormal or unexplained category, because I've never seen anything that would turn a skeptic into a believer. However, lately I've found myself discussing the weird stuff to happen in my life with several different people. I've begun to realize that just because I haven't seen any shadow people or felt a hand grabbing me or no one around, that doesn't mean I haven't had brushes with the paranormal. So here's another story. I have to start off by telling you that my grandmother was a bitch. I know that sounds cold, but let me explain. When my mother was young, my grandmother would tell her to go roll on the floor. That was because her hips were too wide. She would use my mom as her personal assistant to the point where my mom would be forced to tickle her for hours. The relaxed, soothing kind, obviously. Okay. I'm not familiar with this brand of tickle. Anyway, my mom never had any girl talk with my grandmother, never felt truly loved by her, and always felt that my grandma saw her as competition. This abuse led to my mom becoming anorexic, eating only 1 can of Campbell's soup a day, and eventually leading her to say fuck it. Do a complete 360 eating whatever she wanted, becoming overweight. My mom's been through a lot because of my grandmother's mental and emotional abuse. This is where my great-grandmother comes in. She lived in my mom's sort of childhood house with the family until the day she died. My mom called her Nani, as did her brothers. My mom and Nani ended up being more like her mother and daughter. My mom would seek her out for advice. She learned a lot of life lessons from Nani. My mom's told her stories of how she would go walk with Nani and sit behind the makeup counter and just playing with her test products. She told me about how her bedroom was above Nani's, that she would stomp 3 times to say I love you. My great-grandmother would take a broom handle and hit the ceiling 4 times to say I love you too. When Nani died, my mother could sense it. She left the hospital to go home and rest. When she entered the kitchen, she got this wave of relaxed sadness, if that makes any sense. Like relief yet grief, I guess. A minute later, the phone rang and it was my grandfather calling to say that Nani had passed. Now, fast forward several years. My mom's married and has a young child, otherwise known as me. I don't know exactly what age I was, but I had just started speaking. I wasn't at the age where you would expect one to, understand death or care about a past relative, but during this time, my mom took me to the park in our neighborhood. It was just my mom and I, nobody else out there with us. My favorite thing at the park was always been swings. So my mom put me on and started pushing me. A few minutes in, I look over at an empty swing. My mom didn't really notice until I said something that shook her to her core. "Mommy, Nani's swinging with us." I didn't know about Nani. My mom never mentioned her, never talked about her, because how would I understand who this person was? And to say that name, a name that was specific to this one person who passed, was beyond comprehension. My mom asked me, "Who's swinging with us?" I replied, "Nani." I have no memory of this, but my mom tells me this story all the time. It's one of her favorite memories. Two dumb roommates. I moved to Chicago for college. My roommate is really interested in the paranormal. We bond over that immediately. The first few days in the dorm were spent introducing ourselves to the neighbors. Two of them, both sophomores, tell us about a residence hall being haunted. They show us a snapshot picture of the ghost, which looks like a slightly darker shadow in the midst of other shadows. And no, I don't have the photo. My roommate believes it instantly, and I, on the other hand, am more of a skeptic. So like any sane person, we bought a Ouija board. Side note, we went to Target first, and I asked one of the older ladies working there if they had a board. She proceeded to give us a lecture on why we shouldn't use the board, which just added to the whole two dumb white girls getting murdered by ghosts storyline. So also we bought a Virgin Mary candle while we were there, because, Christianity. Anyways, we used the board, spent like 5 minutes talking to a drunk ghost named Sveb. Didn't get jack shit from the board, ended up giving it to a friend, so we only used it once. Yep, we said goodbye. Here's where spooky stuff starts. My roommate starts getting bad vibes in the room. I'm thinking it's just because she's worked up from using the board. But she's serious about it though. So I make the trip to our local Catholic church, which was an experience for somebody who's only been to a tiny country town church, but damn, you guys got enough gold. I get a Bible, I even ask one of the priests to bless it, which he kindly does. About a year later, our Virgin Mary candle gets knocked off the table. The glass shatters, but only around her face. Weird, but hey, shit happens. My roommate starts looking at these other rooms and tells me that I should come with her. I tell her that she needs to calm down, literally nothing's happening. Some other things did happen, but I can't really remember what, but here's the kicker. My roommate was upstairs in the common area while I was in the shower. Bathroom doors locked, no other roommates, no pets, nothing. Now the shower has 2 shelves for us to put stuff on. One is near the shower head and the other is the back of the tub. I have the shower head positioned so the water's coming pretty much straight down, otherwise known as no water's hitting the back shelf. The shelf was mine, so everything we needed was up there, including my razor. So I was washing under the water when I suddenly feel something hit the back of my calf, and then it fell to the floor. I look and I see my razor down there. Now that was weird because my razor wasn't anywhere near the edge of the shelf, and neither I nor the water could have knocked it off. I just got hit by a razor with no solid explanation for how it happened. None of that scared me. This is what scared me. In the condensation that formed on the shower wall, I could see the path the razor took. It was like something was pressing it against the wall as it fell. The razor's path, went up and then down. It lifted up and then came down on me. Ran out of the shower, went upstairs to tell my roommate what happened, and I was standing in the common area soaking wet with only a towel on and just soap still on me. Well, my roommate moved out. I stayed. At least until the year was up. Then I switched to a single room in a different residence hall. This hall was next to an alleyway affectionately called Death Alley. Yeah, one improvement, huh? Well, stuff's happened there, but that's a different story. Nothing else really happened after that. There's probably a logical explanation, and I've had much weirder things happen to me, but I thought you'd enjoy this weird story. Strange person/apparition on the beach. This happened in Daytona Beach, Florida in 2012. It was the summer between my freshman and sophomore years in high school. A little bit of background. My grandparents lived in Florida at the time, closest to Daytona but not Daytona itself. We decided to take a vacation within a vacation, spent a week at a hotel in Daytona. When we got there, for whatever reason, my grandparents decided they didn't want to stay. They would just come pick me and my mom up at the end of the weekend, since they lived maybe only an hour away. My mom and I asked them to drop us off at a Joe's Crab Shack for dinner, and we were going to go walk back to our hotel. Somehow we completely misjudged how far away the restaurant was from our hotel, so it ended up being an insanely long walk. Like 6 or 7 miles, which is like we were thinking 2 or 3. So on the way back to the hotel, it got pretty dark on us. There was enough light from the street to be able to see pretty decently, but to get up to the street, we'd have to go through an alleyway. We didn't feel comfortable with that, so we decided to stay at the beach. Now, I want to say even though it was dark, there was a full moon and enough light from the street that whenever we passed by a person, we could clearly make out their face, if we were close enough. So while the dark may have played a small factor in this, I don't think it was enough of a factor to dismiss the experience. So as we're walking, we see a light, sort of a light-headed thing toward us, like 6-ish feet off the ground. We weren't too concerned because it looked like somebody going the opposite direction as us, wearing a headlamp, taking a nighttime stroll on the beach. As the light got closer, we noticed that the light was extremely steady, not like somebody walking, especially not like somebody walking on the sand. As it got close to us, this is what we saw. Cloaked figure wearing a brown monk-like cloak with a large hood. Wasn't walking, but just gliding along. There were no visible feet, there was no light shining out from under the hood of the cloak. And there was no face, except for the light. It appeared to be completely black inside. Almost like an empty cloak just floating through the air without a person inside of it. It didn't seem to notice us and just glided on past. My mom and I remember this exactly the same. And I'm a very scientific person and pretty skeptical, but I still can't really explain this. It was definitely light enough that we should have seen a face or feet. Has anybody else come across something like this? I grew up in a haunted house, and I need help. I grew up in a haunted house. My parents still live there, and previous to that, my grandmother drank herself to death there. You don't have to believe me at all. I have many photos, videos of ghosts, and, well, I'm a librarian. I researched the property. It was once apartments, and it was the sole location hit by a tornado once. There was a young boy waiting for the school bus in our driveway. That was before we lived there. He was hit by a diesel truck and died. This happened in maybe the 40s or 50s. I need to look the date up again. My parents added a second story and a back part to the house. I lived upstairs, and there's a door to the attic attached to the closet space. I often dreamed about the little boy coming out of the attic. Non-relatives, have seen the boy appear. I even got a photo of him like a full-body apparition, or at least his top half. We had asked him to appear, and he did. Growing up, it was all more of an annoyance, like items missing, footsteps at night, the TV with knobs, before remotes. Turning and changing channels, radio stations changing wildly. It just did stuff mostly to mess with us. Sometimes scary things would ramp up, especially if my parents talked about moving. It would appear as a shadow, would appear as a boy looking in the window. It would swing belts in the closet. Often, when someone outside the family visits, they feel drained and tired, like it drains their energy. You can see physical orbs flying with intent. Sometimes they come, to my video camera, they stop, go another direction. I really feel like there's more than just a boy ghost present. My mom was visiting my mom was visited by my grandmother's ghost. I was once visited by a headless black dog that had, blood spurting out that decapitated part, and I could feel his hot breath on my face, even though he had no face. And once I even levitated in front of my family. And today, while visiting my parents, I got pictures on my phone that became red in appearance with giant orbs. But for the first time, I tried to record an EVP. I've always been hesitant to communicate with the ghosts because it's scary. I asked it how it died, and it said something. With the naked ear, people think they heard front yard. I was wondering if somebody would be willing to clean it up so I could understand the reply. This is only evidence I'm willing to share at the moment. I'm pretty protective since my elderly parents still reside there. I'm dead serious about this, and I don't really want to argue with anybody. You can believe me or you can not. It won't change my story. Ghost gave me a gift. So I just moved into a 5-bedroom house built in the 1900s with my boyfriend. The energy in the house has always felt super off. We hear banging a lot and footsteps upstairs. We have 4 roommates and at least all of us at one point have left the house due to feeling uneasy or feeling scared. Every room in the house has 2 access points in the closet, one in the attic and one on the inside of the wall. Because the house is so old, it has double-walled insulation, meaning I'm literally able to stand up and walk inside the walls if I remove the little door. Like each room has a little door that's poorly nailed into the closet. There's also like an attic tunnel which leads from my boyfriend and I, like upstairs bedroom to our roommate's bedroom. Often the sounds we hear come from places where people can't walk. I also wake up around 2 or 3 a.m. most mornings feeling really scared. But other than the above creepiness, nothing's actually happened that I would consider paranormal. But last week it was really stormy. The energy felt super off. We're having a really loud conversation, just talking over each other when we heard what sounded like a basketball dribbling upstairs. It was loud enough that we all stopped talking to listen to it. Then we heard footsteps from inside the upstairs wall. The bedrooms don't go back as far as we heard the noise, but roommates had to go to work. I practiced Wicca. I was feeling very uneasy, so I decided I'd also leave and get some stuff to protect the house from dark energies. But here's the part I cannot explain. I was burning sage, walking around the house, basically saying only positive energies are welcome here, to please not scare us and to stop bringing negative energy into the home. At the other end of the house, I had some crystals set up, like jet for protection specifically. The cat was with me when this happened, but I heard what sounded like a pig squealing from the other side of the house, like a clatter. Well, I nearly shit myself because the crystals, which were sitting on a flat surface, had all been knocked off the ledge. Figured they'd fallen behind the couch, so I moved it out of the way. They had fallen behind the couch, and sitting on top of them was a blue hydrangea flower. I have no idea how to explain this. I had just cleaned the carpets and vacuumed behind the couch that week, and the kitten plays back there all the time and rips up everything in sight. Then he jumps up on the counter to rip apart flowers. Well, this flower was perfectly preserved, not missing a single petal. Even if after all this it somehow managed to get there, the hydrangea bush out front would have been dead for at least a week. None of my roommates were home or knew that I'd be blessing the house, so they didn't do it to mess with me. But I still feel uneasy on the other side of the house when I'm alone. But on the side I found the flower, I feel peaceful. The only piece that gives off really dark vibes is the closet with the creepy tunnel in the attic. Anyway, has this happened to anybody else? Could this be a gift? I do believe in ghosts, but I've never experienced anything like this before. My Great-Grandmother, the Devil, and Aliens. I've always carried these 2 stories around, so I thought I'd share. Hope I'm not abusing the encounter tag. It's not my encounter, but rather my late great-grandmother's. How she met the devil and aliens gave her a stroke. First, some information about my great-grandparents, specifically my great-grandmother. She was born to immigrant parents in 1911, passed away at the age of 94, Her father was an Englishman, and her mother was from Luxembourg. Most of her family spoke German as well as English. However, great-grandmother only knew a little bit of German. Great-grandmother's mother only spoke German, and was also almost completely deaf. Great-grandmother relied on either her sisters to translate the mangled German or crude family sign language that they developed. Great-grandmother grew up in rural North Dakota, and to frame the time period, she once told me about how when she was a little girl her family would regularly barter with members of the Mandan tribe, whom she described as real Indians, not like today. She also only attended the local school to about 6th grade. Later in life, she was not particularly bright, but not dumb. She was religious, but not a Bible thumper. The type of woman who would give you a religious birthday card and a Ninja Turtle action figure, write a picture of Jesus, but never said grace. The one thing she was always really serious about was how she met the devil. Great-grandmother would tell this story when prompted, but she never seemed to enjoy it, and was always consistent in her descriptions. When she was 10 years old, she was misbehaving. Her father wasn't home, and her mother again didn't speak English. Her mother attempted to control her, but great-grandmother just ignored her. Finally, her mother tried to grab a hold of her, but great-grandmother flailed and almost hit her mother. Great-grandmother's mother caught great-grandmother's hand and looked great-grandmother cold in the eyes. She let great-grandmother go and pointed at the closet and left the room. So she and her siblings were often sent to the closet as a sort of timeout. But great-grandmother knew that she was messed up, or rather she had messed up, so she went to accept her punishment. When she opened the door, however, something was inside. Great-grandmother said the being had hooves and was covered in a dark fur. It sort of subsided a bit on the torso and chest up to the face. The being had a man's face with dark eyes, an unkempt beard, and a mop of dirty black hair. And from only one side of his head rose a deer antler. Great-grandmother said the being stepped forward slightly before she slammed the closet door shut. She shrieked and her mother came to see what the commotion was. Great-grandmother could only really cry and wave her arms, but her mother opened the closet door anyway. The being was gone. She was always very serious about that story, and adamantly writing it even now just makes me feel off somehow. But that's the story of how my great-grandmother met the devil. However, she also said aliens gave her a stroke. A few years before she died, Gigi as they write it, Gigi had a number of strokes. She was in her 90s at the time, and it wasn't really debilitating at first. Just took some time to recover. Then some more quick information. Gigi and her husband, my great-grandfather, adored fast food. They had to substance hunt during the Depression to feed their children, so they marveled at good food fast. Like great-grandpa loved McDonald's, but Gigi loved pizza, specifically Godfather's Pizza. After she had mostly recovered from her stroke, my family took my great-grandparents to grandfather's as a kind of celebration. Being a dumb kid, I got a bunch of quarters from my dad for arcade games and ignored my non-agenarian. That's spelled wrong. Anyway, I got a bunch of quarters from my dad to play arcade games, and my great-grandparents, to this day I regret not spending more time with them, but I had an odd number of quarters that was after the games. The restaurant had one of those little toy dispensers, the one with the little plastic egg things. I bought one with my last quarter. It was a tiny plastic alien giving a peace sign. Done with the games, I returned to the table. I was fiddling with the alien like a classic gray-looking, and Gigi noticed it. When I set the alien down, Gigi took it and inspected it closely. With everyone at the table, she held up the alien and looked at me and said, "Them's the things that come and got me." My mom, half laughing, said, "What?" She repeated herself and then said that there was a reason why she was in the hospital. When my grandfather, which is Gigi's son-in-law, told her that she was in the hospital because of a stroke, she said, "Them things gave me the stroke." The family just sort of stopped pressing at the point, and things kind of settled down. Most of my family chalked it up to a joke of her stroke. I don't buy it as a joke. Gigi was very sweet, but not a joker. Furthermore, I don't think she knew what a gray alien was. She hadn't seen a movie since like the 50s. She didn't even watch TV. She only really read the newspaper, and she mostly did crafts and listened to music in her spare time. As for it being a stroke hallucination, well, maybe, but it's still weird. Anywho, those are the stories of my great-grandmother and how she met the devil and how space aliens gave her a stroke. I like her. My friend called my name at the night of her funeral. And a quick note before I begin. I'm 100% Asian, so please forgive my English. So a 16-year-old female friend of mine passed away last week. This was on Wednesday. It was due to some kind of, medicinal error. I had a huge crush on her and was planning to confess and ask her out, but I never got the chance. On Wednesday, she was taken to the ICU because her condition was worsening. It was 8 p.m. and she passed away. I don't know about it till the next day when my friend told me at school. I was devastated. Cried for God knows how long. Her funeral and cremation was to be on Friday. All of my friends and I decided to go. On the day of the funeral, we all gathered at our classrooms to go there together. She also had a scent I could easily recognize, but not creepy at all, right, guys? Kind of creepy. I got that scent in the classroom right before we left. Thought I was imagining things and ignored it. At the funeral, we said goodbye to her, gave her flowers and letters to all those things that you do at a funeral, including crying. I told her that I love her, that I miss her, and I left a bouquet of red roses on her chest. Although I said my goodbye, I didn't want to let her go yet. When I got back home, I took a shower, tried to relax, but I could only think about her. Things I didn't say, and I'd start crying. Before, I thought I would take my mind off of it by playing some video games. So I started playing FIFA 19 on my PS4, and it was going well. However, at around 8 p.m., my cat was rummaging around upstairs, so I went to bring her down. After I successfully driven my cat away, I started making my way back downstairs. But as I halfway inched down the stairs, I heard my deceased friend yelling, "Hey, Red!" I still wanted to see her and talk to her, and I quickly went around the house looking for where the voice came from. When I went outside, I could hear the neighbors' kids playing loudly. The voice I heard was quite different from theirs. My cat was staring at the garage, but I couldn't see anything. I gave up and thought to myself, maybe I'm hallucinating. Went back to playing FIFA. But 30 minutes later, I heard another "hey" right beside me. I looked around me and saw nothing and then started crying again. I told myself I'll never see her again. Fast forward to this week, Monday. My friends and I gathered again to just chill. I then brought up what happened on Friday, and turns out my friends also had something to share. My mate said that he heard knocks on his window, but he's too afraid to open them. My other friend said some kind of motor made sounds while she and her mother were talking about a friend who died. As soon as we finished our stories, I caught a scent of her again. I searched for her, and nothing. On Tuesday, we did some kind of sermon or ritual that would release her spirit. In the middle of it, I got one last scent of her as she was sitting beside me. After that, it was gone. I no longer get those scents or any visits at all, really. So yeah, that's my story of how I got visited by my crush. Unexplained flash of light and image. In the early 90s, I had a buy-sell-trade record store in a historic neighborhood in my city. I lived in the loft upstairs with a roommate, John. He had just moved back to town from Portland, and we had just finished a tour as a guitar tech for a band, Everclear. Nothing romantic, just a really nice and easy friendship with lots of music, laughs, and fun and adventure, or misadventure, depending on how you look at it. John was a tall, dark, bushy-haired guy with piercings everywhere and tattoos, big silver skull rings on his fingers and chains on his wrists, long jeans, shorts, black leather jacket, Doc Martens, and this was kind of the grunge era. He presented a pretty imposing figure, but he was just the sweetest guy ever. We had the greatest laugh, perfectly straight, white teeth, unforgettable smile, and we got along great. I loved just hanging out with him. He was a fellow Taurian, my spirit animal. One lazy afternoon, we were just in the loft watching TV, Jerry Springer of all things, and it was a bright sunny day with the south window open. A gentle breeze was coming through. I seated on my bed against the south wall with the open window, and John seated on the couch to the left of me. I got up to go to the kitchen for something, and I said, "Hey, you should reach into the freezer and get yourself a Dove bar. Grab me one too while you're there." He returned with 2 ice cream Dove bars, one to each of us, and, well, went about eating them and resumed watching Jerry Springer. The TV was on the wall directly across the room from where he sat. As I was looking at the TV, I saw a sudden flash of golden light splash across the wall behind the TV. I had barely enough time to process that, wondering what had caused it. And overhead there was another light or something up on the ceiling. What I saw was like a playing card, like an ace of hearts, only without the A's in the corner. A large heart inside a rectangle shape that appeared out of nowhere in the ceiling above our heads. I looked at John to say something. He had his head tilted back, scraping the last bit of ice cream off the stick, and because of this, he saw everything I saw. He was completely freaking out, his mouth full of ice cream, pointing and trying to say something, his eyes all wide and excited. I was glad that he saw it too, because I was sure as heck not knowing how else can explain it. I was hoping that he could. I'd lived there for at least 2 years at that point, and I'd never seen any flashes of light or images in the ceiling or walls before that day. And I never did after that day either. Jenna and I talked about it often, but neither of us could come up with a suitable explanation as to how or why it happened, except to say that it was one crazy haunted loft. If anybody out there knows anything about this kind of paranormal experience, I hope you'll let me know. It's boggled my mind for years. It's worth noting that this is one of my odd, unexplainable incidents in this loft, as well as the business space below it. There's many witnesses to the incidents. An old plantation house in Georgia. My parents divorced when I was 5. We lived in a small town. It's Glenwood, Georgia. That's where everybody knows everybody, probably too well. My mother had to find a place and a job quickly. She ended up working at a convenience store and renting a house near town. The house was built sometime but not long before the Civil War. It was old, white on the outside with a green roof and a large front porch. It had a green porch ceiling. Inside, the ceilings were about 14 feet high. The walls were sort of tongue and groove. And one thing to note was how odd the walls were painted. This was 1995. When you first walk in, you're in a yellow foyer. At the entrance to the house were double doors. Directly across the foyer were double doors to the living room. To the right was a pink bedroom with purple floors. My mom, my brother, and I all slept in this room because it was the only room with a fireplace that was unblocked. To the left of the foyer was a yellow bedroom with a blocked fireplace. That room was a junk room. Behind that bedroom was a kitchen complete with appliances from the 50s that miraculously still functioned. And behind that room was my playroom. It was blue and had a blocked fireplace. It was constantly cold even in the summer. And finally the living room and bathroom they were like add-ons to the house. In their place used to be a screened-in porch which had been closed just to make these rooms. As a result, most interior doors had small window panes going around them because at one point they were exterior doors. So in the back of the house, you could see the fields and the outhouses and the caved-in slave shacks and all that. My childhood memories are spotty at best, but I can relate things that I remember and things my mother and uncle said. I remember being in the front foyer and looking up at the ceiling while sitting on the floor, feeling as if I were dizzy and falling, as if gravity reversed itself. I would often stick my head between my knees and look out behind, trying to duplicate this feeling, scary and kind of fun at the same time. Anytime I, or anyone for that matter, would walk into my playroom, it was always extremely cold. So cold that the windows always stayed shut, even in the middle of summer. Georgia, no central air conditioning, so in the wintertime that room was unbearable. Sometimes, in the dead of night, we'd be lying on my mother's waterbed in the pink bedroom and you'd hear what sounded like a newborn baby crying from that room, all the way across the house. My mom would get up to go check it out, and she'd arrive at the door, the crying would stop. This happened multiple times when we lived there. Another time, my mom was dressing in the pink bedroom and looked over to the window to find a man staring at her. She was angry more than shocked and ran outside to confront him, only to find no one present. We were in a big clearing. He wouldn't have been able to run away that fast. My uncle would frequently stay over and would often have objects fly at him, doors slam behind him. Whatever was there clearly never wanted him around. One incident stands vivid in my head. My mother and I were sitting on a couch, and that playroom door was in view of where we were sitting. We were watching TV, and we hear the click and turn of a door handle. The door of the playroom just opened on its own, then slammed shut with enough force to crack one of the window panes surrounding the door. There were no windows open, and the only person in the house was my younger brother, who was 2 at the time, and he was asleep. These doors are heavy, solid wood with huge, hard-to-turn brass doorknobs. There's no way that door should have done that on its own. My mother looked over at me and said, "I think it's time we go to bed." The neighbor across the street lived in this house for at least 20 years prior to our move-in. He knew the family that owned the house, who my mom rented from. The same family have owned the house for the entire time it stood. So he was told by the member of the family who previously lived in our house, around the turn of the century, a woman lived in this house. She wasn't mentally well, and at some point she gave birth to a baby. The baby was deformed. She killed it and burned it in the fireplace. This is how my uncle tells it. Nasty. My mother says that the neighbor told her that the baby was stillborn and was cremated in the fireplace, which was common then. We don't know for sure, but likely it was my playroom that the baby was cremated in, especially given the activity. We moved out in the summer of '96, and no one's lived in that house since. I'd asked my stepmother about it from time to time, and I even went to look for it once. The house is so overgrown that it's hard to spot from the road. It sits vacant, rotting, and decaying. Oh, and if you're in Glenwood, Georgia, find Orchwalkie Country Store. Turn left onto County Road 12, then go maybe a quarter or maybe half a mile up. Houses on the right behind a rusted chain-link fence off in the woods. Overgrown, hard to spot from the road, but you can see the roof line. I believe me and my friends saw something or someone disguised as a human. So this happened about 2 years ago or so, but it still sends chills down my spine whenever I think about it. There's a local factory that was made in 1890, opened in 91 as a sewing factory where people handcrafted detachable collars and cuffs. In 1999, it was repurposed as a bunch of little consignment shops throughout the whole building in each room. Today, there's still the original huge elevator shaft with the rickety gated doors. Anyways, one night me and my friend decided to go and check out one of the bookshops that just opened up there. We headed downstairs, went and left to the store. Eventually took a break on one of the benches before leaving. To our knowledge, nobody else was in the building, or at least in the basement with us. So we're sitting there, and on the way to the bench, it's positioned pretty flat up against a wall where you can see all the way to the hallway, with a flight of stairs to the right and one of the shops to our left. While we were sitting there talking, I started feeling this uncomfortable feeling. I tried telling my friend I wanted to leave and hurry up, and I just didn't like this feeling. He told me to calm down and that we'd leave in a minute, and the uncomfortable feeling just went away. As we were about to get up, we just saw somebody come around the corner. We saw it start approaching us. Figured it was the maintenance worker, but that feeling of uncomfortableness came up over me again. It was worse this time. Now, the way he turned the corner was completely unnatural. He walked to the end of the hallway, stared at the front of him, just maybe for a solid 5 seconds, then turned toward us, took a brief pause before coming our way. The way he turned the corner, though, it seemed like he just knew we were there. He was completely unfazed when he saw us. I would say that's plausible, but we were being fairly quiet in the hallway, and it was maybe 30 or 40 feet long. So we'd have been taken decently loud, or rather talking decently loud for him to have heard us. I went into panic mode, but my friend kept her cool. The place was still open, we weren't breaking any rules, we were just sitting on this bench. My friend calmly looked at him and just said, "Hi, how you doing?" The man didn't say anything, he just kept walking towards us at a somewhat rapid pace. I remember looking at him in the eyes. He had zero expression, not anger, not happiness, not confusion, not nothing. Severely unsettling. Even after my friend said something to him completely unfazed, he was just on a mission to get to us. You'd assume if this was a maintenance worker, he'd either tell us it's time to leave or say, "Hi back," or something, anything. But nope, just this blank, expressionless face making his way towards us. After he didn't respond to my friend and started getting close to us, we just gave each other this "we need to go" look, sprinted out of there. We got out of the building and down the road, and that uncomfortable feeling left me. Started calming down. We didn't really talk about what just happened, we just went our way back to my house. And ever since that night, I haven't been able to go back to that factory or any of the shops there. Something about that man wasn't right, and it sends chills down my spine seeing him. Sends chills down my spine just typing this. I'm a firm believer of the paranormal, and I can just about guarantee that whatever that was definitely wasn't human. Terrifying experience last night. Possible haunting. I've had a few experiences in the past which other people had also experienced, but nothing quite this spooky. And I had some real weird, I guess you could call them situations in the past. The last thing was probably 10 years or so ago. Whether this is relevant or not, I'm a 37-year-old male who lives in Birmingham, England, and I live with my wife, my Japanese Akita dog, and my wife's mom. We care for her. She's really unwell with her health. Her husband died just over 5 years ago. So in the night I had a really bad dream, and I was woken up by my wife. Apparently I was shaking and making fast noises that sounded like mini screams. I realized the dream I had was a continuation of other dreams, which was a continuation of other dreams. So I was in a dream series, you could say. If you've never had them before, they can be weird. In this dream, there was a giant pink balloon in what will be our child's bedroom. I'm planning on starting a family soon, and upsetting I know, but this balloon is sort of in memory of a child who's died. Presumably our daughter who wasn't even born yet. My wife sort of made this balloon, but no idea how. I remember over other dreams I was scared of this balloon. In my dream this balloon followed me and it felt like it was trying to kill me. Then it floated past me fast and I screamed and ran to my toilet. My wife came to the toilet to see why I was shouting and I told her the balloon's going to kill me. She didn't believe me until the balloon opened the door. This is when I woke up. And then stuff happened like in my waking life, which we both experienced. I went downstairs to get a drink, came back to bed, and she asked me about my dream, so I told her. But I missed out the part about the balloon representing her daughter. When in bed, I felt a very eerie coldness about my body as I tried to forget the dream. Then I thought about the balloon and looked at my TV. As soon as that happened, the LED lights behind my TV turned on the exact second, I shit you not. This made me slightly panic, and my wife thought it was weird. My wife's mom's husband, who died, was an electrician. He had an obsession with LEDs. I'm not saying that was him, but the LEDs have randomly come on at night before. Maybe something to do with my PS5 updating in the night. I'm not sure if they had turned on or off within 10 seconds of my TV turning on, but they were on for like 2 minutes. Then something that shook me to my core and stopped me being able to breathe for at least a couple seconds happened. The LEDs turned off, and about 2 seconds later the TV flashed. It's never happened before. We both saw it. It flashed, and it was like, wasn't even the whole 46 inches, wasn't the whole screen. It was like an oval-shaped flash, which looked like it was the same shape and size as either a big balloon or a human face. We were both really scared. Got out of bed, turned on the TV, and everything else, just electrical off from the wall. Turned everything off. I struggled to sleep. My body kept being extremely cold. I was like sweating, and I was warm, and the heat was on, and it was like 23 degrees in the house, plus my body heat in the duvet. Our dog normally sleeps in the room, but was sleeping outside the room on the top of the stairs, which isn't completely abnormal, but normally is in our room. I eventually got back to sleep, which was thankfully uneventful now. Anyway, this was my story about being terrified last night. Hope it never happens again. I hope for you too. Skeptics who keep being skeptical despite terrorized colleagues. I'm a 24-year-old male, and I'm Italian. And I'm pretty skeptical and don't believe in ghosts, despite a series of unexplainable events, mostly during night shift, which terrorize my colleagues while I try my best to investigate them to no avail. This is a recount of the phenomena encountered while working at this old abandoned, everybody there died in the plague in the 1300s. It's like a medieval village turned hotel. It started with a Russian woman on holiday with her husband. As I was leading her to a room, she stopped in front of the door asking me something bad happened there. She felt a bad energy. Imagine this said with a strong accent. I brushed it off, and when going back to the front desk, cracked a joke to my colleagues. They told me the old owner hanged himself in that room. The private church bell rang 3 times by itself. It's a small medieval church with nothing really electric. I held the key to the only door. The other female coworkers didn't want to go investigate, but I didn't want to guess breaking into the place or something, so I went to check the door. Still locked. As was the door to the bell. It opened to the rope, and it was swinging as if it was pulled up that moment. Night shift coworker never goes into the kitchens to eat ever again after he came running upstairs when I was not telling me really what happened, but I'll update on that later. As I was having a meal, multiple weird events over following nights happened, including one table blanket slowly flapping around as if moved by wind, despite no windows or air conditionings or tables being perfectly still. Chairs moving upstairs and doing a lot of noise. When I confronted my supervisor about it, he said he never moved from, only the chair to the office. Okay. Me having an overwhelming feeling of something looking at me while eating, I started looking around the room just to find a door curtain immediately swing closed. I rushed to open it and found nothing outside, and the odd thing is atop a big flight of stairs. As nothing could possibly get away that quickly, as my coworker, if he was pranking me and said he never moved from the office. I heard my name distinctly called from upstairs. I was annoyed at the interruption and was going upstairs, and the other guy said he never called me nor heard any voices. And one night I was passing by an old village well. I don't know why, but I had the urge to look down into it. As I did, I noticed something swimming away in a flash and submerging. Can rats fall in wells? Finally, a question that I can answer. Absolutely. Rats can follow miles. See you later.